11. There we go. Welcome to the November 19th, 2022 meeting at CB11's Land Use, Parks, and Planning Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by our Assistant District Manager, Khalid, the staff liaison to our committee for this evening. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, participants panel should appear, and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom to be recognized. Khalid, if you please could do the roll call, greatly appreciate it.
You got it. Give me 1 second. Okay, members, so I'll be calling you all by your last name in alphabetical order. Please note that there are 9 total committee members, just to make sure. Yes, you have 9 members as James Horton is no longer a member. Devon Cronshaw.
Present.
Thank you. Kenneth Crouch.
Present.
Thank you. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Thank you. Jessica Morris.
Here.
Thank you. Nilsa Orama.
I'm here.
Thank you. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Thank you. Vinny Torres. Okay, absent. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Thank you. Candy Vives Vasquez.
Candy is on the phone with me. I'm sorry, Khalid. She's trying to log in, so I'm going to send her the link again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Khalid, you could give her, grant her a presence because Candy's reached out to me before the meeting. I spoke to her a few times and I know she's going to try to work with you in the back end to try to get her back on. Appreciate it.
Understood. Okay, so then you definitely have quorum. You have only 1 member absent, and that is Vinny Torres.
Thank you.
All righty.
Okie dokie. So we have a quorum present. Let's do an adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objection, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Next stage. Adoption of the meeting minutes. We will table this for next month's meeting in December. We owe you the months of June, September, and October. We will get that to you shortly. Apologies on the delay. There's been a lot of, for lack of a better word, miscommunication more on my end than anybody's. So I take that responsibility and I commit to getting you guys the minutes as soon as possible. That said, we do have the option with YouTube. I definitely encourage members to look at the YouTube video and, share it. I was looking at it today. I didn't see too many views. Announcements. In the interest of time, each section of the agenda should describe the announcements. I know we had an informational update provided through one of the members earlier in the week. We'll get to that when we talk about new business. Or actually, we have an opportunity now for informational updates. I personally don't have any announcements. Do you, Mr. Khalid Nixon, have some announcements for us?
I do not, but I would refer, of course, to Angel. He would be better positioned to
Excellent.
or anything, okay?
Thank you. No, definitely. Just to give a heads up, we're definitely reaching out to ECF. They look like they're going to be landmarked for the calendar for December. For those that may not be familiar with the ECF project with Avalon Bay, they're pretty much talking about redesigning an existing project, and we really have some concern with that. So I do encourage members to reach out, seek engagement from the community to members that are interested, and definitely bring them on board. Anybody who's interested in more data, definitely reach out to me after the meeting. I'll send you a link, and we can have further discussion on the topic. So now we'll go to informational updates. I would like for Miss Morris, if she's on, Jessica, if you don't mind.
I am here. Yeah, do I have to turn on my camera? I guess it would be polite
It's
to do
your
so.
call. It's your
Pardon
call.
me.
Hi to see you. It's good to see you.
Hello, I am taking full liberty of being at home right now, but thank you, Jason. And I would agree continuing the conversation with regard to ECF, maybe even for a moment in old business, sounds smart. I've got a couple of questions that I want to put on the record before they show up, so they can be prepared to answer them, or we can be prepared to ask them. My two informational updates, let me just pull them up. So since our committee last met, and it's my understanding that committee is where the work happens generally. So since we last met, I had a couple of invitations to participate in various events that pertain to a couple of different purviews of this committee. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about each of those with the rest of the committee members and publicly. The first one on November 3rd, I attended upon invitation by Civitas, an organization that has long worked on land use and other advocacy issues, both in East Harlem, but mostly on the east side. They convened representation from Community District 11, 8, which is right south of 96th Street from 5th Ave, east, Community District 6, which is below 8, and also there was presence from Community District 5, which extends further across Midtown area. So the general intention was to really, there wasn't much of an agenda other than to bring our most pressing land use related issues to the table, and to consider if there is alignment in shared issues across district lines. I didn't bring anything in particular, was more just there to listen and hear out what that platform may be, if it may be useful to us to bring issues there and build some capacity. A couple things that were interesting, and I'll just run through really quickly. There was a mention of one of the top issues in East Harlem is the oversaturation of methadone clinics and the citing of those considered as a land use issue. Brought up by Sean Hill of the Harlem Neighborhood Block Association in the northern part of our district and also in District 10. There was an issue of height limitation, contextual zoning, and affordable housing brought up by Community District 8 and Civitas generally. There was a point of inquiry about a sanitation garage siting mentioned from Community District 6, which is further down the east side, which had me scratching my head wondering they're not getting the communication they need apparently from DSNY, but I'm sure that their land use committee has minutes as well that I haven't necessarily looked into yet, but it may be worth understanding what's going on there while we fight our own battles up here to better understand if there are some systemic challenges in siting with regard to DSNY, which of course, I think we know there are. And then a mention of the Esplanade as a sort of unification frame of working together to urge that forward. So whether this is a venue that may be worth discussing ECF issues, I know part of the holdup and the cost increase and the now apparent redesign is that there was a lawsuit involved, which put significant delay, and whether that came from perhaps our neighbors, I don't know, but it seems like it may be a valuable opportunity to engage with stakeholders who are on the other side of the line there, but who also, I guess, have vested interest. So we can talk more, Jason, about how or if we want to utilize that potential for bringing, our concerns to the table, or if keeping our powder dry and sort of saying we're not interested in engaging is more the tack to take. We'll figure out what makes the most sense. There's the official board position, but then there's the opportunity to work together in those kinds of ways if beneficial. And then on 11/4, I was invited to this wonderful conference hosted by the Ford Foundation and the community-based organization Save Harlem Now. They convened for a preservation conference, and I'll say it again, Save Harlem Now. There was some imperative to that, where we know in 11 development pressures have always been a concern before and throughout the rezoning. And I think Harlem has felt those pressures as well. And there's a place where we meet. So hearing about those challenges and also hearing from East Harlem Preservation, who was a part of the discussion, thinking about whether landmarks, which is in the title of our committee, and LPC particularly, are too limited in their tools to effectively engage in cultural preservation beyond artifacts, especially in communities that had once been redlined, which means that there was a historic disinvestment and an inability to maintain structures, buildings that now have to be of a certain quality, caliber, and present in order to essentially be protected. So that's another potential cross-district frame of thinking about our shared problem set and how to collectively work together to either change policy, to have preservation and development be more in tune with the type of cultural landscape preservation that may be needed in urban areas like ours. So happy to continue to update if there's any traction there. And I do understand that Ascendant, who is on the call today talking about a different project, has done some incredible work and just been recognized for that. We may hear about it next month, but clearly there's a recognition that we really have to start to work on protecting what was now today, so we don't see it erased in any frame of the future. So thanks for the floor, Jason, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Definitely. I definitely have one question, particularly if you got any data from those events, like any pamphlets, I would love for you to share with the committee. First and foremost, thank you. Right? Thank you for your service. You are 100% correct. The work happens as much on the floor as it does off the floor. So when we're off the floor, we have to be engaging with our district. Those of you that are aware, my constant chant is for us to engage with our local community-based organizations. And that means as much as the public ones that we can Google, the private ones that are grassrooted in the efforts of the work that with all due respect, when we're doing our 9 to 5s, Monday through Friday, that's the efforts that they're performing within our district. So thank you, Jessica. And my question is more of an ask, if you do have that opportunity, And we'll definitely continue to have some conversation about this even further on in the agenda when we talk towards the points of agreement. Beverly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jessica, for that presentation. I do have a question because when you mentioned the Ford Foundation meeting that you attend with Save Harlem Now, I was at not community board, Councilwoman Jordan's monthly meeting or weekly meeting just this past Monday. And one of the participants at the meeting was speaking about this event and the great information that she got out of it. One of the things that she mentioned was how the other communities use, I think, landmarks for preservations of their housing, and how she gave some type of percentages on how many in other communities their percentage of preservation of their culture and history within their communities is so much higher, like 28%, 38%. And we only have like 18% of our buildings and cultural institutions preserved here. So I was definitely, when she was telling me, I was like, that's a good program to get into, Save Harlem Now. And I'm glad that you went, and I'm looking forward to also trying to participate in that program. And thank you very much for this information, because you just cemented what I heard from her, that it's a good program to get into to preserve housing here in our district. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Beverly. And I think to Jason's point, the grassroots CBOs, they know and are responsible for that fact finding, and often for applying to grants to fund the effort, right? And I think the more capacity that they can build through community members saying, yes, this is a good thing. Yes, I believe in your mission. Yes, I want to help support in whatever way possible, even if that's showing up or if that's learning about what they do or telling your neighbors. That's exactly the type of capacity building that preservationists in particular rely on, because it's only through critical mass that things stick around, and through collective consciousness of understanding why they matter, the storytelling, which it's not written on the walls yet, but in some ways it has to be, so that it doesn't disappear as things evolve. But please reach out if you want to talk more or get involved directly with the organization. I'm happy to tell you more about what I know, which is limited, but would encourage a direct engagement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you both. Thank you both. As you guys all know, I love the engagement from us all. So I appreciate everyone's efforts, and I encourage those of us, to even step forward and reach out to Jessica and get a little bit more engaged in some of the stuff that's happening in the district. That said, I personally don't have any other information or updates, and I would love to move the agenda on out of respect for our time. Thank you, Khalid. So we have one presentation today, pretty much, which is for the new business. Those of you, have always screamed and hollered about how complex and difficult it is to approve a ULIP action, when it comes before the table, and we have no choice but to make a decisive decision on it, within 60 to 90 days, right? So here's an opportunity where a local developer within the district came forth and, is notifying us well ahead of time, a great champion partner within the district that is coming ahead of time. And this gives a lot of opportunity for those of us that are new to the committee to kind of get engaged and know how intimidating it may seem sometimes when this stuff first comes to the floor. I've definitely been there. I feel that way, still to this day, honestly, because ULIP is constantly and never ending in its change. And that's why I applaud brothers like Mr. George James, who's our, land use consultant expert for the district. And I also, as much as I've encouraged you guys to communicate with each other, I definitely encourage you to communicate with Mr. James Khalid and Angel, our support team, that really helps us push forth these things. So that being said, Angel unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, but I know he definitely wanted us to get Mr. Cirillo on the floor to talk about the pre-ULIP informational presentation for a project that's proposed to provide affordable senior it's an affordable senior mixed-use development, Carmen Villegas Apartments, and I will now turn the floor over to Chris Cirillo from Ascendant Neighborhood Development.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chris, and I have apologies for the interrupting. If I recall, I think you also did a presentation in the past for us on LPC. So that, I mean, on landmarks preservation. Yeah. So that other so that might tie into even some of the things that we're discussing today with Jessica. So I know you're here for presentation 1, but if you could give us 1A to tie that in, that would definitely implore. And for the newer members of the committee, I always like to, just rehash some of this information. So then that way we're more mission driven. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to mention, thank you, Jessica, for mentioning the Save Harlem Now conference. I wasn't able to attend it, but heard about it, and it looked like an amazing program. And we, Ascendant is a member of a coalition called Landmark East Harlem. We have presented to the committee before updates on preservation issues and preservation work that's happening in the community. And we are scheduled, we've spoken to Angel and are scheduled to come and give an update next month in December, and to hopefully get on a more regular cycle of coming during the kind of news and update section of the meetings on a more regular basis, so that we can do sort of shorter, more frequent updates rather than coming once a year or once every few months and taking up a full presentation block. So we'll definitely be back in December with updates about Landmark East Harlem's work. And there's actually a slide in our presentation tonight that touches a little bit on that. So I'll come back to what Jessica was referring to a little bit later as we present the project. But tonight we're here to talk about some of the other work that Ascendant does. So for those who aren't familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization based in East Harlem. Our offices are on 116th Street. Between First and Pleasant Avenue. We've been around for 34 years. And we have a current portfolio of 28 affordable rental apartment buildings scattered all around East Harlem and Central Harlem. And those provide affordable rental housing for seniors, for families, for individuals. And we have in our development pipeline another 4 projects, total of 7 proposed buildings that are in various stages of pre-development. All of those are in East Harlem, and they will add another 600 affordable rental apartments to our portfolio over the course of the next couple of years. And we have presented on, I think, all of them except for the one that we're going to present tonight. And we're here a lot at the committee, and think it's really important to bring projects early on in this process because they are complicated, they are impactful, they're often big. We're going to talk about a big one tonight. And so we really want feedback early so that we can make sure that the projects are really meeting everybody's goals and the community's needs. So we are here way before this project is ever going to be in ULIRP to introduce it to the committee and to the board and community members who are attending. So with that, I will go ahead and jump in and talk about this project. So it is a site that Ascendant currently owns. In 2003, we opened a senior affordable housing development called Casita Park Apartments, which is located at the southeast corner of 111th Street and Park Avenue. It has 94 affordable rental apartments for low-income seniors. So it is coming up on its 20th anniversary. That site was sold to us by HPD. It was formerly an NYPD parking lot site. Yes, there was another one along Park Avenue. And at the time, we were able to secure funding from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development to build this 94-unit low-income senior housing. The site is underdeveloped under current zoning, which is R72. And at the time that the building was built, there were parking requirements, even for affordable housing and senior housing, and even very close to transit. The site is only a block away from the 110th Street station on the 6th line. And so part of the site had to be set aside for a parking lot with that has 12 spaces, which is underutilized. And so we have been looking at this site for a long time for additional development, to add density to the site, to add additional affordable housing units on a site that we already own and control. And so we're here to present for the first time our proposed project, which will add a significant new number of senior affordable housing units on this site, as well as some other uses, commercial space, and we're hoping some community facility space as well. So we're going to talk through the project and then components, the phasing plan, what we think is a rough timeline for the project, a little bit about our development team, and then hopefully have a bunch of time for feedback and comments. So I think we will go to the next slide. Derek. Thank you. And I should mention, I'm joined this evening by Derek Gaskill, who's our project manager, A.L. Hugh, who's our design initiatives manager, and members of our development team, who I will introduce in a minute. So these are the items that we wanted to sort of go over. It's sort of our overview for the presentation. Next slide. And so a little bit about the development team. So Ascendant is the owner of the site, and we are, have been working on planning for this project for a number of years. Our initial planning began, I would say, about 5 years ago. And there were some earlier iterations of plans for this site. We were on a bit of a hiatus with planning for it with the pandemic and with work on some other projects that were going through ULURP. And we're a little bit further along in the process, but we decided last year that given the scale of the project, we wanted to bring on some development partners. And so we've added 2 partners to our development team. We have representatives of those development partners who are here tonight. They're in the attendees section. So our partners on the project are Urban Builders Collaborative, which is based here in East Harlem. It's the development arm of Latier Construction. Their office is just down 110th Street from this site, and I'm sure that the community board and the committee know them well from their prior work. And we are also joined on the team by Xylem Projects, which is an MWBE firm headed up by Nena Lynch. And so they are our development partners on the project. We came together as a team to actually in response to HPD's RFP for the NYPD parking lot RFP site further north from here at 119th Street. Unfortunately, our proposal wasn't selected, but we really enjoyed working together. And as Ascendant was thinking about who we wanted to partner with on this project, we really felt like these 2 Harlem-based partners were great partners to work with, and we wanted to bring them onto this project. And they were excited to join us. And so we do have representatives of both groups with us tonight. Next slide, Derek. And this is probably a little hard to see on your screen because there's a lot of information on it, but it's a map of CB11. And this is really just to kind of point out the yellow diamonds are all of our existing portfolio buildings scattered all around the neighborhood. The red diamonds are the pipeline projects that I mentioned. This committee has previously reviewed and approved our Las Raíces project, which is 4 small scattered sites, a total of 83 apartments. We've done a pre-ULURP informational briefing for our Beacon project, which is on 120th Street, which is the redevelopment of the multi-service center site, another HPD RFP that Nilsen knows very well. The third project is our Share NYC shared housing project on 106th Street. That was also the result of an HPD request for expressions of interest. And so the site that we're here to talk about tonight is 110th and Park. And this slide, just to pause briefly and go back to the preservation conversation. What you see shaded on the map in the different colors, and we'll obviously send to Angel and Khalid this presentation for the board to have, are all of the survey areas that we have worked on with our partners at Landmark East Harlem and with funding from the Preservation League of New York State to survey historic and cultural resources around the neighborhood. So we worked to get the first state and national register listed historic district along 116th Street listed a couple of years ago. We have a second historic district, the one that's highlighted in purple at the northwest corner of the neighborhood, that is in the process of being nominated. We're working on that nomination now. We completed a survey earlier this year of the whole southern half of the neighborhood from 115th Street down to 96th, from 5th Avenue to the river. That just won the Preservation League's award for a publication statewide this year. There was an awards ceremony on Monday. And we just found out this morning that we've also won an award from the State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for that same survey. And we can provide a link to that as well. It's on the Landmark East Harlem website. And then we secured another grant this year to complete surveying the northern portion of the neighborhood, the area that's highlighted in yellow. And that survey will be completed by next year, at which time the entirety of Community Board 11 will have been surveyed, and we'll have a lot of information about all the historic and cultural resources. And working with this committee and others in the neighborhood and Landmark East Harlem, hopefully be able to really do a lot of advocacy with the Landmarks Preservation Commission, the State Historic Preservation Office, to get more properties and potentially historic districts listed and designated. So brief side view and a little preview of what we're going to talk about next month, but back to the Carmen project. Next slide, Derek. So what are we proposing? And I guess I want to stop for 1 second to just also mention, I think a lot of people know who Carmen Villegas was, but for those who don't, who may be newer to the community or newer to the board, I just want to mention, when I joined Ascendant in 2012, 10 years ago, Carmen was the chairwoman of our board of directors. She was also a longtime board member of our organization, a longtime member of Community Board 11, and just generally a huge presence in the neighborhood and an advocate for the neighborhood. She passed away about 6 months after I started as the executive director at Ascendant. And ever since then, it has been a top priority of our board to honor Carmen's legacy in the neighborhood through the naming of one of our new developments for her. And we, are very honored to have found a way to do that and to have it be associated with this project, which we think, will really be a fitting tribute to her legacy in the community. So I just wanted to stop and pause just for anybody who doesn't know who Carmen was. And obviously, part of honoring her will be finding ways through art and other elements of the project to make sure that people know what the name means and who the person was that's being honored. So the project that we are proposing for the site at the parking lot of the current Casita Park Apartments is a proposed new construction 28-story building. It will have approximately 220 low-income apartments for seniors, ground floor commercial and retail space, and community facility space at the ground floor and potentially on the second floor. It'll be financed through HPD's SARA program and HDC's ELA program. It'll be 100% low-income housing. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how we are also working as a proposed phase 2 of this overall redevelopment to thoroughly renovate the Casita Park Apartments, which is the existing 94-unit building on the site. So we'll flip to the next slide. So this gives you a bit of context outlined in red. Hopefully you can see it on your screens, is the site of the existing building and the proposed new building. So it is 2 blocks east of the northern edge of Central Park. We're right along the Park Avenue Viaduct on the east side. This committee has previously seeing the project, the privately developed project directly across Park Avenue from us on the west side, which is the one that has the fresh supermarket that's being developed in it. And we are also to the southeast of the full block Sendero Verde project, which is in construction. We are also 1 block west of the 110th Street station, as I mentioned. Next slide, Derek. This is looking at the site, the existing parking lot and the existing building looking east from over the Park Avenue Viaduct. And so that's 110th Street on the right side of your screen and 111th Street on the left side. And we're looking east toward the river. And the Clinton Houses NYCHA development are directly south of our site. Next slide. So in order to do what we're proposing, there are a number of proposed land use actions that are subject to ULURP. This site is currently zoned R72. For those who were around when we did the neighborhood plan and the neighborhood rezoning, at the time, we were in discussions with HPD about an earlier iteration of this project and hoping that city planning would include this site in the rezoning that they ultimately proposed for the neighborhood. They did not, unfortunately. So the rest of the block was contextually downzoned, R7B in the mid block, R78 on Lexington. They pretty much didn't bring the Park Avenue rezoning further north from here down, although the Sendero Verde block was upzoned to R9. So what we are proposing to facilitate this project is an upzoning from R72 to R91. That is a zoning map amendment. And it's a zoning text amendment because with that upzoning, we map this as a mandatory inclusionary housing site. So that's the text amendment that's involved. Because the site was previously disposed through ULURP by the city, we are working through with HPD a process. Their original disposition approvals only contemplated the 94-unit existing building. And so there will likely be a city acquisition and disposition of the site to facilitate the new project, which is needed because we need to do a new environmental review, which will assess the impact of this new, larger, denser development on the site that wasn't initially contemplated under the original disposition approvals. So that is basically a process that happens when we're ready to close on the project, where on paper, HPD momentarily reacquires the property and then redisposes of it to us under the new disposition approvals, which will have studied this proposed development. So there will be an environmental assessment statement. We're in the preliminary stages of preparing that. It will look at all of the categories that an EAS typically does. And that will be obviously shared publicly and reviewed and have a public comment period as they do before we get to a point where we're ready to certify the ULURP. So that will look at all of the impacts that the project may have in the surrounding area. I see a hand up, but I don't know if I'm supposed to call on people with hand up or if someone else is.
I would think it's best for you to get through your presentation. We'll
Okay.
write down our questions and we'll ask at the end. Thank you.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So we have just a couple, we'll keep moving. A couple other slides that just kind of show building massing and just kind of how we looked at how to shape the building. And we're working, I should have mentioned earlier on, we're working with Magnuson Architecture and Planning on the design of the project. So they have been working with us and with our development team, looking at the development potential, looking at the rezoning options. And one of the things that we really wanted to do with the design, and I think that they have done successfully, is create a consistent base around the full perimeter of the site. So taking the existing Casita Park Apartments, which is a 6-story building, as our baseline, they've developed a base for the new building that really responds to that and creates a kind of a complete base around the entire site. And then there's a setback tower, which allows us to, develop the the full potential of the site and develop the largest number of units that we can under the proposed rezoning. And the slide that you're seeing now just shows the proposed building, which is in green, in the context of the many large towers that are in the surrounding area. The existing ones are in the darker sort of rust color, and Sendero Verde, the large tower there, which is in construction now, is in sort of a lighter pink. And then two other buildings which have gone through ULURP and are approved, but are not yet in construction. The Terrence Cardinal Cook Tower and the tower that went through public approvals that's in CB10, but at the northeast corner of the park. That's the site of the La Hermosa church. So just to put in context the proposed new building. Next slide, Derek. And then just a couple other views. Obviously, we recognize this is a large building, and people may have some questions and concerns about height. So just kind of wanted to provide a number of views to put in context the density at this location. Next slide. And the next one, it's just looking north and south. And so just kind of getting into some views in context. And I'll pause here to just note the facades are still a work in progress. We are looking through and considering a variety of materials. You'll note that there is a large solar array. We're proposing a very large solar array on the roof of the building as part of our resiliency and sustainability efforts. We're aiming to achieve net zero with the building. We're also exploring the possibility of facade integrated photovoltaics. And we've applied for and actually received some funding from NYSERDA, the state's sustainability agency, to actually do some in-depth explorations of these things. So, you know, the facade direction, I think, is kind of where we're headed. You know, lots of big windows. There are obviously be some great views from the apartments in the building. But in terms of color and exact materials and texture, we're still in early stages. So, you know, the plan is for it to be as vibrant as the neighborhood that it's in. You know, my constant refrain to our design team is there are a lot of buildings in the neighborhood that are very gray, and that is not our intention. So please don't look at it and think it's going to be big and gray. That's not the final anything. So just it's really more to demonstrate massing and beginning thoughts on window placement and setbacks and texture and shaping of the facade. Next slide. And the other thing that creating the common base will hopefully allow us to do as part of this project is at the setback level where the new building sets back, create a roof terrace that'll be accessible to residents that we hope to be able to connect to the existing roof of the Casita Park Apartments building. That is not currently an accessible roof, but we're exploring as part of our renovation plans for that building the potential to make it one. So, you know, aspirationally, the goal is to activate that roof and make it an outdoor space that residents of the buildings will have access to. Next slide. So how do we get there? So on the left is sort of the existing conditions. This is the existing Casita Park Apartments building at the moment. Phase one is the proposed new building, which, as I've mentioned, has to go through ULURP, an environmental assessment statement. So we are definitely several years away before construction starts. But we have been meeting with HPD. They have approved us to move forward with the project. We have had preliminary meetings with the Department of City Planning. They have also given us, you know, preliminary feedback and go ahead to keep moving forward. So we are doing that. You know, doing more assessments and understanding the all of the details we have to move through. And then phase two, we are currently in the exploration phase, looking at upgrades to the existing Casita Park Apartments building that will eventually tie it in with the Carmen Villegas Apartments building, so that at the end of the day, at the end of phase two, it will read as one larger project and be, accessible to all of the residents of the entire site, with common amenities, shared courtyard, shared rooftops, and with some significant upgrades to the existing building, in terms of sustainability, resiliency, and other things that we're kind of working through at the moment. Next slide. And this just shows one, again, early rendering of the potential revitalization of the Casita Park apartments. For those who are familiar with the building, sadly, there's not a lot of active ground floor uses along the viaduct. It's a, I don't know why, I wasn't a descendant when it was designed, but there are apartments on the ground floor along Park Avenue facing the viaduct, which seems like not the best place to have put apartments, but that's what we have. So we're trying to look at ways that we may be able to reconfigure some parts of the building to open it up a bit more, make it more active at the ground floor, and find other locations where those apartments could be relocated. Again, this is all early, very conceptual, and still lots of work for us to do as a team and with our design team and all of our agency partners, including HUD and HPD and city planning, to explore a lot of this further. Next slide, Derek. And this is just an early concept rendering, looking at the ground level from 110th Street looking north. So we're facing sort of the main residential entry would be off of 110th Street. To the left at the corner of Park Avenue would be ground floor retail space, and it would be a bit set back so that there would be some space for landscaping and, depending on the use, potentially seating to kind of activate that corner. At 111th Street is the southern boundary, as you all know, of La Marqueta. And so, with the redevelopment plans, hopefully progressing for that in the coming years, the goal is to really activate this corner and have it be a welcoming, pedestrian-friendly space so that anybody getting off at 110th Street and walking down 110th Street and turning the corner at Park Avenue, really finds that a pleasant experience with activity and light, and a lot of public-facing uses and eyes on the street. So to the right of the main residential entrance, we have what would be an entry to some potential community facility space, and we're still in the early stages of thinking through what that might be. We've had some preliminary conversations with SAGE, which is a nonprofit organization that works around the city and around the country, providing services for LGBTQ plus seniors. And they operate a number of senior centers around the city. And we've had some preliminary conversations with them about potentially taking some space in this project. Again, it's still early. And then to the far right is kind of an early concept of this double height space that we're hoping to create. Right now, a lot of residents of our existing building get off the subway and walk through the parking lot to the rear entrance of Casita Park because it's the most direct route to get into their building, rather than walking around the corner to 111th Street. And so we want to try to kind of formalize that desire path through the site and create an opening that brings light and allows residents to be able to access the courtyard space. In this rendering, we're not showing sort of fencing. There will likely be some way to sort of control the space, but also hopefully a way to open up the space for certain occasions, certain events. We also think that that wall space there creates a great space at grade level for our public art initiative and to really do something vibrant and colorful that reflects the history of this part of the neighborhood. So that's the view that you're seeing there. And then Derek, next slide, which is, I think, our last, just another view looking at the building in context of the event. So that's our preliminary presentation of the project. We're here because we want your feedback. So please, Jason, however you want to.
Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Much appreciated. As stated earlier, this is very early in the URLA process. So again, I applaud Chris for being a great partner within the district, respecting our process and giving us a heads up of what's coming down in the pipeline. I say that to say this, that, you know, he gave us an excellent presentation and there's a lot to digest. I would try to, you know, encourage as much feedback as humanly possible, but do not take this as the last opportunity to have discussions with Chris. Or if something comes up within, you know, the coming weeks, to send an email, so then that way we could keep engaging with Chris, and I promise you he'll be back. So that said, I do know Jessica Elliott had her hand up first, so I will recognize Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for your presentation. And first of all, congratulations to you and your team and all of your partners for all of your great work. Just wanted to, I live near here and I walk by here every day. So it's exciting to see this. I'm wondering, there's ongoing sewer construction work on Park Avenue right now with all of the development that is, as you noted, ongoing in this part of the neighborhood. It's increasing this, you know, needs of the sewer systems. And I think we were told, you know, that it would be a short time that the streets were opened. And it's been a long time. So I just wanted to know if that relates to, you know, is incorporated in the work that's ongoing there now, and what the impact would be.
I mean, I don't know that any of it is contemplating our development because we're so early in the process. I hope that whatever is being done to the sewer system contemplates additional development beyond just what's happening on the west side of the street. I
doubt it.
I doubt it, but you know, obviously, and that's obviously something that, you know, the environmental assessment will look at. And thank you for raising it, because now it's something that will be on our radar screen, and we will certainly, you know, ask as we go through. I mean, one of the things that I failed to mention that we are responding to is a new, I don't know that it's fully a requirement yet for HPD projects, but it's something that's, I guess, coming, that developments that are in areas where there are resiliency issues and flooding issues, such as this one, even though we're far inland from the river, we are still in the part of the neighborhood that was built on marshland, and there is water very close. So we are designing the building to meet the more stringent 2080 flood zone requirements that HPD is starting to ask development teams to look at. So we didn't bring any of the interior plans this evening, but you know, there will be ramping up in the lobby to the design flood elevation. There will be mechanical spaces will not be in the basement. They will actually be a portion of the second floor will be mechanical space. There'll be other mechanicals on the roof to really try to address and make sure that the building is resilient. And it's part of what we're thinking about as we're thinking about the existing building, which was not built with any of that taken into account, has all of its mechanicals in the basement, is a very inefficiently built building with through wall air conditioner sleeves, and just is like got as many holes in the walls as Swiss cheese. It's, you know, so we're trying to take all of that into account, but thank you for the heads up about sewers. We will, one more thing to think about.
Yeah, and thank you for preemptively answering my second question about resiliency. I was going to ask you what your strategies were.
Every one of our projects is in a floodplain. Like I think maybe one of our 7 pipeline sites isn't in a flood zone. So I think we are very familiar with ramps and elevated mechanical equipment and backup generators. We are planning for all of it.
Great. Well, as much as you can do for the public realm as well, like the streetscape around your building would be appreciated. I know we had asked when the sewer work was beginning that some green infrastructure be implemented, and that was not done. So if there is any impact to the neighborhood or as much as you can do to green and permeate those surfaces, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yes, I should mention, in addition to Magnuson Architecture and Planning, Terrain is our landscape architecture firm, and we actually have engaged them across our entire portfolio and all of our pipeline projects. So we work with a lot of different architects on the designs of our different projects for variety and to work with different firms and bring different ideas to the table for every one of our projects. But the one consistent thing that we did, and it was actually because of an early on in the design phase of this project several years ago, we were picked by Enterprise to participate in their Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute. And we took this project in a very earlier stage to that in Seattle and got a lot of great feedback from designers from around the country about things that we should be thinking about with this site. And one of our main takeaways was that we needed to have a landscape architect on board and really be thinking about the kind of sequence of public to more private open spaces that this project presents with the existing courtyard, the streetscape, the setback of the new building, the roof terraces, all of that. And so terrain is part of the team. They're very familiar with the neighborhood. They're familiar with us and all of our sites. And so they're coming up with a common palette and looking at things like street tree planting, all of that from the tree itself to everything around it, water retention, native planting. So all of that is very much part of the design process. And the other thing that I'll note is that we are lucky that when Casita Park was built, we planted a lot of street trees that have now 20 years later grown in quite nicely. And our goal would obviously be to, despite the disruption of construction, hopefully keep as many of them as live as possible during the couple of years it would take to build the building, and have them there as a much more mature, resource along all the sides of the site. So that'll be our challenge for Latier to figure out, as the GC on the project, how to keep all of our trees alive. So, yeah.
Not a difficult task, I promise you, Chris. Thank you for the explanation, and thank you, Jessica, for the questions on environmental and open space. Jessica Morris.
The 1-2 punch again.
We got the three coming up.
Pretty sure. Thank you, Jason. My first question was, and it's sort of rhetorical. The cat just scaled the fridge, by the way. Sort of rhetorical. Who decided to come to us so early? And clearly, because I think that represents the position that Ascendant holds relative to community relations in a neighborhood that you've invested in, and continue to in building your legacy. So thank you for doing that. And I guess I want to treat my question and informational exchange as more of a conversation than anything else right now. Hopefully there are some open ears, and I really appreciate the development team as our attendees tonight. I think that really flips the coin on the usual frame of conversation. So that's impressive. One of the buildings that was absent from the map is the Carolina, a couple blocks south. And I think I toured during Arctober a couple of weeks ago and was blown away by the quality of housing provided. And so I might steal Candy's fire by bringing Ella to the table this early. I think your capital stack is the question that kind of I want to bring up, how you're going to do this and deliver it and finance it, and do all of what we would like to see that is more and extra and better and good to reinforce your legacy. I think that someone's got to have a really great calculator going. But before you kind of answer that question, I want to bring up, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the New York Federal Reserve down on Liberty Street, and they had a really incredible program looking at affordable housing for seniors, challenges and opportunities for service-enriched properties in the 2nd District. And service-enriched properties, that aging populations have a whole different set of needs. And often those needs are space and place-based. And if you can accommodate those needs with services on site, then there is potentially another funding stream or layer in your capital stack to directly serve your residents as their needs evolve and change. I don't know if it's something you've thought about, and I think relative to Ella and the depth of affordability, I think when you can look for those prototypes or opportunities that haven't yet played out yet in the market, but if you're leading edge, you may get the opportunity to try them and play them out. Enterprise has a frame communities of opportunity that they're also working on relative to this service enriched frame of when you have a supported community, what that does to your, your turnover and whatnot. So I'm happy to say more, and I'll put the link to the program in the chat. Jennifer Malinsky at the Harvard Center for Joint Housing Studies and Aging, Housing and Aging Population is the program. They've got lots of data, lots of stats, and lots of creative ideas on how to add to your capital stack to finance some of these service enriched opportunities that improve the quality of life and the point of service to your residents throughout. And what percentage, is going to be from East Harlem ultimately. So I know some of those things are still working out, but again, a conversation hopefully starts today. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So there's a lot there, and yes, all of that is on our radar screen, and we're thinking through all of it. Because the existing building is a senior building, kind of early on in our thinking, the goal was to add to and augment that community by building a SARA-funded building here. So a building for seniors, a new building for seniors to add to the existing community of seniors here. And because we're working on projects around the neighborhood that are serving a variety of different populations, it felt like this site being the senior building made sense because, we have our shared supportive housing for young people on 106th Street. We have the Las Raíces project, which is for scattered sites, which is affordable rental housing for households of all different sizes and at multiple AMI levels. And similarly, the Beacon project at the multi-service center site will be more housing through the Ella program. So we really kind of have focused on this site as the site where we wanted to really highlight senior housing. And I think because of the existing building and the proposed building, the opportunity to really get those synergies of this is a place where we have space in the building, in the existing building that's a bit underutilized, some amenity rooms and other things that we're hoping to, redesign and make more useful for existing residents, as well as the spaces that we're designing into the new building, both the potential community facility space, which could be a senior center operated by Sage, who would potentially also be providing services for the residents of the building. And then additional amenity spaces. I failed to mention that that floor at the setback, which is the 6th floor of the new building, which opens out onto the roof terrace, is where we've concentrated kind of resident amenities. So that entire floor is devoted to amenity spaces for residents, laundry room, community room, and other spaces that we're still kind of working through and planning. Obviously, it's not a small building. It would be one of the largest, if not the largest, SARA-funded projects. And we've already been having those conversations with HPD. And folks on the committee may know better than me. There are very few, if any, SARA buildings in the pipeline or developed recently in the neighborhood. And that's an issue. There's a huge need for senior housing. We have closed waiting lists at our 3 existing 202s, 2 of which are in East Harlem, one's in Central Harlem, just a couple blocks away from this site. And so of our existing 690 apartments, 218 of them are in senior buildings, and we have closed waiting lists for all of them because there are so many people when we've marketed the properties apply that we have to close the waiting list and work off the waiting list. So if you come in off the street and need senior housing, we cannot accommodate you, and that is hugely frustrating. And I think the other thing that we've learned now, having this building, Casita Park, the existing building, our Lucille Clark Apartments, which is in Central Harlem, and then Mount Pleasant, which is on 116th Street, where our offices are located. The first 2 opened in 2003. Mount Pleasant opened in 1997. We have seen people age in place in our buildings, right? You needed to be 62 to move in. So, maybe some people were in their 60s then. 25 years later, they are not in their 60s anymore. Their needs change. The buildings haven't, right? The HUD Section 202 program, which financed our existing buildings, was not a service-enriched environment. It was not contemplating, it wasn't really set up to respond to the changing needs of seniors as they aged in place. And so it's one of the things that we grapple with in our existing portfolio buildings, and it's one of the things that we're trying to address as we're thinking about the planning for this building, how this building can help support the existing building so that at least Casita, as it becomes part of this larger community, we have resources on site and services there. So, obviously any examples, best practices, programs that people are familiar with, please send it our way. I don't think we have in the presentation my email address. I'll drop it in. You all know how to reach me. Angel.
I put a link in the chat, and Chris, it sounds like you're learning as you're going, and really taking that opportunity to make every project better. And at St. Margaret's House and Lower Manhattan, the ED there, my takeaway was you need a live-in community coordinator. So funding for that now, and kind of making sure that person on site is going to be a part of kind of the integrated community. I think will, at least that's my takeaway that I think to plan for ahead of time. Thank you.
The other thing I'll mention on that, I know that I don't want to belabor the point, but MAP, our architects, have a lot of experience in designing buildings for seniors, designing buildings funded through the SARA program, award-winning projects in the Bronx and other places. So, they have contributed greatly to, our collective teams thinking about how to design the building, and Sam, who's here as an attendee, is representing MAP this evening and listening in to hear all of this feedback. And so, we have had a great design process over the last, coming up on I guess it's over a year now that we have been working on kind of developing these plans and thinking about what the potential is in this site. So we're really excited to be at this point. But the reason why we come early is because all of this feedback is really helpful in thinking through how we can continue to evolve the project moving forward.
Excellent work. Thank you both. Devon, forgive me if I'm butchering it. Devon?
Thanks, Jason. It's Devin. Yeah.
Devin, got it.
As a new committee member, I'll forgive it. That's okay. No problem. Thanks, Jason. And really appreciate it, Chris, the rich presentation. And actually it builds a little bit, I think, off of what your previous response was around this, this new construction, new development, really supporting the residents of the existing Casita Park apartments. And I'm wondering what impact you've sort of planned around, that this new construction will have on the existing residents of Casita Park apartments, how they maybe have been engaged to date, and sort of your plans moving forward to make sure that they're a part of the process. Thanks again.
Sure. Yeah, so Derek and Al from the Ascendant team who are here have been leading our outreach efforts. Obviously, some of our ability to do in-person outreach has been a bit more limited than we would like, given the ongoing pandemic. But we have started having events at the building and starting to introduce residents of the existing building to the idea that we're planning to do development on the site. Obviously, it will be hugely impactful during the construction period for the restrictions and complications it will add to people's lives, not to mention noise and dust and all the things that come along with construction in the city on a dense urban site, as well as the permanent impacts that we certainly acknowledge. A big building next door is very different than a parking lot. And as much as, I don't think most people love parking lots, a new building takes up space, casts shadows, has other impacts. But, I hope that through engaging our existing residents early and getting their feedback, and also letting them know that the goal is not to build that new building and walk away. We are long-term owners. We're not looking to develop the site and then be gone. The goal is really to use the new building to help improve the existing building as well. And that has been for us, really integral to this process and in thinking through who our partners would be and who we wanted to work with on our design team. Our mantra has been, this is a two-phase project. It is doing the new construction, adding the units, making sure that we are accommodating more seniors in the neighborhood, bringing a really resilient and hopefully very attractive building that adds affordable housing, but other uses as well. The existing building doesn't have any commercial space. It doesn't have any community facility space. It was designed, in a very different era under a very strict program that didn't allow a lot of those things like ground floor uses that activate the street, which we would take for granted today, but were not kind of the way buildings were designed earlier. So I think, the goal is really that at the end of the day, this becomes one larger holistic community. And I think, at that point, when everything is done, it's no longer the Carmen Villegas apartments and the Casita Park apartments, it's just the Carmen Villegas apartments. And there's a north wing and a south wing, but ultimately one community. So that is the vision, and that's the direction that we're going to try to bring everybody. It certainly complicates things. One of the other big pieces of advice we got in that design institute was, we had been thinking about the parking lot as a discrete project because it's much easier to just say, okay, I need to deal with this agency, and I just want to do this one thing. It becomes much more complicated when we try to do something more holistic, because it's just a lot more complicated to involve new construction and rehab and multiple agencies and multiple funders, but it's the better result and it's the right thing to do. So that's the plan. But obviously, there's going to be a lot of outreach, community facing, resident facing, with neighbors, and hopefully to get the best project at the end of it.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Great, thank you. Chris, wonderful presentation. I have three relatively short questions. First, so there's a rezoning involved. Is there going to be any other discretionary actions, a special permit, anything else involved in this, or is this an as of right under R91, which is a very rarely used district? That's one. Number two is, you said EIS a couple of times. Do you think that there is going to be a requirement for an EIS on this, or you think that an EIS is going to cover it and you're going to get a negative declaration? And then third, I'm hoping you could talk a little bit about the solar canopy. It seems to be hanging over the edge of the building wall. Is that a am I misreading the diagram? And are there other models of buildings where solar canopies hang over the edge of the building wall? All right, that's it.
All right. So I am not a zoning expert, but yes, I'm sorry, the EAS solar panels, the first one.
The first one was any other discretionary actions?
Any other discretionary actions, yes. So not related to the zoning. So it would be a zoning map amendment from R72 to R91, a zoning text amendment to map mandatory inclusionary housing on the site. And then the other discretionary approvals under ULURP would be acquisition and disposition of city-owned property. But at the moment, we don't anticipate any special permits or anything else needed to facilitate the project. Okay. And that's, that's also based on our preliminary conversations with city planning about, sharing this same presentation with them and making sure that we were on the right track, ULURP actions wise. And then, yes, I was saying EAS for environmental assessment statement, because I think we believe, and our environmental consultants believe, that it will be an environmental assessment statement, not an environmental impact statement. But once we do the EAS, we will determine if we have any significant impacts and need to move to an EIS. And if we have them, we will, and go that way. And the third one was, sorry.
Canopy, the solar canopy.
Canopy, yes. So yes, the renderings are correct. The canopy is shown as extending over. So the tower itself sets back, but the canopy extends out more towards the property line. I don't know off the top of my head of any existing examples in New York City, but it's certainly something that we are exploring and that the design team believes is feasible. That's part of what we're going to be using our NYSERDA funding to explore. I mean, the goal is obviously to generate as much of our electric demand on site as we possibly can. We're also exploring other things like geothermal to really be, as off the grid as possible. There may be other zoning or building code issues that come up as we further explore this, but right now the goal is yes, to have the larger solar canopy up top and have it elevated up so that we avoid the situation where if it's flat on the roof, you get less panels because there have to be the pathways for the fire department, which reduce the impact of having the solar. So the idea is to have it raised up on the canopy to maximize the solar potential.
Would it be over the elevator bulkhead and all of that, or are you thinking you're having gaps in it? Like at that?
I honestly don't remember. I'd
Okay.
have to ask the design team. I don't remember how they are showing it.
Okay, I mean, just for the committee, I presented on zoning for zero carbon, one of the City of Yes zoning text amendments last month. And this is, right now, you can't do this under zoning, right? You can't have it hang over the edge of the building wall like this. But, according to the description of zoning for zero carbon, you can. So I think this is looking forward to an amendment to zoning that would be happening sometime in 2023.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Chris. Beverly, and then we're gonna close.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris, for such a great presentation. I have some questions in regard, several questions on, like all over the place. But as George was speaking, and you also alluded to regarding the geothermal heating system, can you explain how that would work? I know that was one of the options that the 145 project was also going to do, but they were more closer to the water than your building is from the river. So I'd like to know how would that work, and what Jessica brought up earlier regarding the sewer line. How, does that also be taking place all at the same time? The geothermal heating system with the sewer lines being all connected, or done at the same time. My other question was, since you are asking for a change in the zoning from a R7 to a 9-1, would that also be a zoning for the building that you already have there also? Would that change? Because if it was built, at different zonings and you're changing, would you be using any of the air rights that, since you're not building up on that other building, would you be able to use air rights, or have you used air rights to add to the new construction building that you're proposing to do? The other thing was you had parking. So I want to know what you're going to do about parking. And if you're doing a phase 2 regarding the rehab, as another member spoke about, the disruption for the seniors that's there, and especially since you're going to try to put all the roofs together on the 6th floor, would you have to relocate those tenants that's on that floor into other parts of your buildings? And have you spoke to them about that?
Okay, I think I took notes on everything. So the geothermal, and I am not an expert on geothermal either, but we have sustainability consultants on our team who are. That is basically just happens on the site itself. And it basically involves sort of drilling down on the site itself. And we've done preliminary analysis that indicates that it is feasible on this site. And so it doesn't go offsite. It wouldn't conflict with any, existing public infrastructure in the public right of way. It would be purely within the footprint of the development site. But we're still exploring that and determining if it is feasible. So that's part of the study that we're kind of currently ongoing. The second question was about the zoning. And Derek, can you go back to the slide that shows the zoning map? Because I think it's more helpful to see this than to have me explain it. So essentially everything that's shown in the red dotted area, which is the whole western end of the block, which is, it would be, is proposed for upzoning from R72 to R91. So when city planning drew the R7B zoning district mid-block here as part of the East Harlem rezoning, which is a contextual downzoning that happened on this block, because originally this whole block was R72 under the 1961 zoning. So when city planning did the East Harlem rezoning, they did R7D on the east end along Lexington. They did a mid-block section where there are lower rise, more contextual existing buildings and some newer buildings that are also sort of mid-rise contextual. So they put R7B on the mid-block. The reason there is a jog in that zoning district boundary there is because it follows our property line. So they left just our site in the old R72 district. So we are proposing to rezone all of the remaining R72 on that site to R91. And what that allows us to do is, because the existing building is 6 stories, with the R91 zoning, we get additional density, we get additional floor area, and that all then happens on the site where the tower is proposed. So were we designing a building for this site from scratch today with a blank slate, we wouldn't design part of it with a 6-story building and part of it with a 28-story tower. We would probably do something in the middle to try to get the same density, but perhaps spread out more. But because we have an existing 6-story building that was developed earlier on 20 years ago, and the footprint we have to do new construction and to develop as many units as we hope to be able to achieve here, all of that floor area ends up in the tower. So, essentially the entire site gets zoned to R91. The floor area gets utilized on the site where the new tower is. So that was question number 2. Question number 3, the parking. So there's an existing 12 space parking lot at Casita Park. It is underutilized. It is not, for the most part, utilized by residents of the building because most residents, the vast majority of residents, don't own cars. Most of the cars that park there are staff members of our property management company. And so the parking lot, obviously, with the new tower will be eliminated, and parking is not required under current zoning. So there would be no parking under the redevelopment scenario. And then the question about the rehab of the existing building, we are still in the very early stages of both outreach to residents about that and also our exploration of what is possible with the existing building. So, aspirationally, we are hoping to be able to do, activate the roof, at least part of the roof of that existing building. Hopefully to do some type of recladding of the building, not even principally for aesthetics or to make it match the new building, although that would be nice to have it feel like one community, obviously, and that's kind of what we're showing. But because the existing envelope of that building is so porous and is so poorly insulated that it is not an efficient building, and with energy efficiency standards and sustainability standards increasing rapidly with the need to move buildings toward electrification, toward more sustainable and more environmentally friendly heating and ventilation systems. The goal really is to reclad that building, to increase insulation, to eliminate those air conditioning sleeves, and to institute sort of a new system to bring heating and cooling to that building. Also to improve noise attenuation. That existing building is really noisy because it's adjacent to the viaduct. And so, you know, the ability to upgrade and improve resident experience. I've been in many of those apartments on the Park Avenue facing side of the existing building, and it is very, very loud. And so the ability to bring more heavily insulated walls, better noise attenuating windows, and eliminating the air conditioning sleeves is a big part of upgrading. And so hopefully the potential disruption to residents of that will be outweighed by the net benefit of what the final product is. But we need to do more studies, and we're in the process of working with our design team and our structural engineers to really assess what is feasible given the current structure of that building and what is possible given that it's an occupied building, and what can we achieve.
Yeah, because even when you're speaking about for the noise and it's coming to the sleeves for the air conditioning, do that mean that the whole building on that side are they going to be together using the same heating system for both buildings and heating and air conditioning, or would those be two separate systems for them, even though you're going to be doing some rehabilitation to the first building?
You know, that's one of the things that we're still exploring, and that's why we've sought and received the funding from NYSERDA to explore a lot of these questions about what can we do that's the most sustainable for the new building? What are the possibilities for upgrading the existing building? Obviously, the two buildings, although the goal is to operate them as one, you know, community so that it seems sort of seamless at the end of the day. Ultimately, each of them is financed and will be financed by different entities. We will have different requirements. So, you know, in some senses, they will still operate as separate physical entities. So we don't know at this point if they will have common systems, or just that they will collectively have much better and more sustainable and energy efficient systems, but separate systems. So that's still part of our exploration process. We're still really early on in that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris and Beverly. That said, I'm going to close this portion of the agenda and move us along. But before that, Chris, again, I thank you and applaud you for, you know, again, as Jessica constantly expressed today about continuing to build your legacy and being transparent and forthcoming to the board and to this committee. And we really appreciate your efforts, and we look forward to working with you and collaborating with you on this project. I do have some recommendations, but I do think it's something that we could talk more towards offline with, in some aspect, even some of the conversations we're having with environmental impact. We have so many other committees that are so involved with the district that I know you've presented to in the past, that is just ringing in my head, that may be able to assist with some of the efforts and even the concerns relevant to the studies you're doing beforehand. So I thank you. And I guess my only ask is if you could give us the presentation. Everybody asked everything else.
Yes, of course, we're happy to, you know, and we're constantly upgrading and updating our website and putting, you know, new information and presentations on our ascendant.nyc website for all of these things. So, you know, that's a big part of, you know, transparency and, you know, creating multiple ways for people to be able to share feedback and thoughts and constructive criticism, or just criticism. That's okay too. But yeah, and obviously, you know, we have taken other projects beyond this committee to other committees that have, you know, had an interest, or where this committee has said, oh, you should go and talk to, you know, open space or youth or, you know, economic development and culture. So, you know, certainly happy to do that as the project develops, as we, you know, as other committees may have an interest in hearing about it. Certainly housing committee and others may be interested. So happy to get as much feedback along the way as possible.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Khalid, if we can move to the next agenda topic, I really appreciate it. I know you guys got to switch up the screen. Yeah. Thank you, Derek, as well.
Thanks all.
brings me to my favorite part of the committee meeting, which is the points of agreement. So just to give a little bit of feedback, to those of us who are, the long and the short of it, the city made an agreement with us many moons ago, and we want to remind them that they made that agreement and not necessarily hold accountable, but inquire about some of the projects that have been taken off, have been put back on, or probably more importantly, we're not really necessarily seeing any traction. This was brought up by myself and the DM back in September, and there was a big concern brought out by other committee members for various projects that are going on through the district. I unfortunately wasn't able to express last October, on October at our committee meeting about some of the planning that we were doing, because I couldn't speak. I was I promise you guys, I was listening to everything, but for whatever reason, my mic wasn't working. So I blame the technical difficulty. But that being said, we're starting to generate what many moons ago, some of you members that have been on the board a little longer than me know as the project trackers, right? And I think that implores to some of the conversation that Jessica brought up last month with a rolling action item list. Like, as you've seen today, this project was brought up. We're not going to hear about it for years from now, right? And some of you will be here, most of you won't, right? Some of us will move on, we'll progress. And I say that to say this: I have every interest in my chairmanship until, you know, I get sat down to develop a process that we can monitor all these projects simultaneously that are going on, projects that have been completed, projects that are upcoming, projects that are potential, which I love to hear from our committee members. I get emails all the time from committee members about various locations throughout the district that are being underutilized, underdeveloped, and, or for lack of a better term, abandoned. And as you can see, this is a benefit where we get a local CBO that is able to utilize some property that they have. And unfortunately, there are other properties within the district that are city owned that aren't getting that same 10 to 11 current, as I would call it, that is constantly brought up by various members in the board. And the interest that I really took into heart from the committee was us building a strategy, was defining a strategy on how we can activate the points of agreements, and more importantly, remind our local officials that these agreements were made. Some concern had to deal with the mayor, the change in administration. I, for one, am not as concerned with that as maybe others would be, because, you know, this is contractual. And the reality is we have to just enforce it. And that's a different type of context of how I'm oversimplifying it. But the reality is this is memorialized, and this is something that we as a community, as a committee, need to chase down. And the only way to do that is to get involved. So one of the biggest takes that I asked last month, which came from Mr. James and Ms. Kane, was the presentation on the points of agreement and reminding the committee what the points of agreement was. And again, as always, George, thank you for your presentation. It was outstanding. There was a lot to digest, right? Reminding us what other members of the board made agreements to, you know, something as simple as 2017, right? 4 or 5 years ago. We're now reminding ourselves of that agreement. And more importantly, to some degree, we have to remind the other committees, right? Because all the work doesn't fall on land use. I do have to remind some of us that are, as we've talked about with cross-committee collaboration, many of you, if not all of you, have to choose 2 committees. So when you're on another committee, and yeah, you're talking youth and education, as I may be when I'm talking about statement of district needs, I like to remind my alternate committee about the work that's going on here at land use, which is my full intention to, when I go to executive this month. I have every intention on bringing up some of the points that Jessica brought up, that Beverly brought up, that George brought up, that other committees have to hear, not necessarily just through, you know, the camera or the minutes, which tends, in my personal opinion, to be a little bit reactionary, but to be proactive in the engagement of what we want to be done within our district. And I have to say, I applaud all of you for constantly raising the bar. And for me, because it's like, as soon as I feel like, oh, I got this, we're going to do this, you guys just, oops, we need to do this. And I want to applaud you for that, because that reminded me harshly of how easy it is for these things to slip and to be forgotten about. And that's myself included. So the biggest take that I got from listening into the meeting that Nilsa was ever so graceful in chairing was that we need to come up with a strategy. And I have to remind some of us, we have a committee, we have a board, and more importantly, we have staff. Right? I have to say, for those of us that give our per diem, our 2 or 4 hours a month, there's people that are rocking the clock 40 hours a week, right? And we need to work with them. You guys will constantly hear me to encourage that. And why do I say that? Because in some of the conversations I had with committee members since last month is, Jason, what do I do? And the answer, as simple as it may sound, can be very complicated, which is get yourself educated, engage, and then, for lack of a better word, present to the table, right? Which is what we're going to call this process. And I would love for you, those of you that have been showing interest to the points of agreement, to get really acclimated in understanding what was agreed upon, and more importantly, looking for the projects which, you know, we're spoiled with our vice chair, who's also the chair of open space, who has so graciously came up with a process of the cross committee collaboration tracker that allows other committees, and forgive me because I know this is another fire hydrant that you're going to be drinking from, but that are allowing a lot of other committees to work in tandem on certain issues and challenges. And this is one of these situations, right? The SDN process, for those who forgive my acronyms, because I'm one that hates it. It gets said to me at work all day. The statement of district needs process in advising the city of New York, what are the needs from our district, is a board, 50-person wide, 98,000 resident involved practice. Right. And that is the same mindset we have to have when engaging people for the points of agreement, mainly HPD, which has been a tremendous challenge in our communications, probably more bureaucratically, if for lack of a better word, than I will say when it comes to process, because they're very involved in process. But we would like to have some more conversations with them that relate to this particular agreement, that also relates. I know the challenges that the district needs committee had with going through that process. So that said, in conclusion, the conversation was to develop a tracker, which, you know, we love to give names to things, but I promise you this isn't one I made. The project tracker, which will list out all the items in the points of agreement, which George was so gracious in providing to us in his presentation. We'll use a simple Excel spreadsheet. List the relevant governing agencies next to each one of those agreements. Maybe there's one, maybe there's two, maybe there's three. List the relevant politician within our district that can assist in the debate, or better yet, the representation of that point of the agreement, right? We'll just, as a simple situation, like if we asked for a new school and they said they were going to give us a new school, and now we look at the new school and we can't build a new school. Where's the money for the new school? And what do we have as a plan to propose to the city in, for lack of a better word, reaffirming the agreement for the points? Or maybe we need to do the 2022, you know, revision to the 2017, or at this time, the 2023, because this year's a wrap, right? And the next 2 months is over. Most of you I won't see next month, but I promise I'll be here because I committed to getting our minutes closed out before the end of this year. So we're going to list the agencies next to those points. Simultaneously on this tracker, I would like, and of course, we're always open to comment. This will be, I'm not the best with the computers. If you leave it to me, I'll create the track, I'll email it to you, but then to put it up and so you can make comments and you edit. So what I'm doing right now, I'm giving you my problems. So those that want to jump in and get involved, please help me because I'm not the best with the SharePoint or the OneDrive, and I think that helps some of us. But more importantly, I do think we should have some offline discussion, not necessarily in the meeting, but a working session to figure out how to better strategize and making these requests relevant, right? Our points of agreement requests that were relevant to the land use actions that happen in our district. And then finally, to that point, the committee. And of course, what does this all sound? It sounds very familiar, doesn't it? It sounds just like that SDN tracker, it sounds like the cross-committee collaboration tracker, or the rolling action item list that was emphasized last month. And the reality is all these things are constantly rolling action items. We just have to reactivate. And as you kind of see, I don't know if it's just coincidental or strategic, where, you know, June, July, we're off. August, we're asleep. September, we come back, we start waking up. October, we gotta get something out. November, December comes back the holiday. I mean, you know, some could say I'm conspiratorial, but that being said, I would like to be a little bit more applicable in the sense of how to become practical. So the next month's discussion is really for ECF. I don't want to drown the water on ECF because I do know that we're going to have every opportunity at that meeting to have a conversation with them. And remember, they don't know what they're going to present to us. They're going to, you know, they're kind of coming up with it as they go. But that's definitely something that's in the line of our arrangement with particular agreements in the past with a ULA action. Right? It's not necessarily for the points of agreement.
Pardon my interruption, Jason, but I have a point of clarification, if you don't mind.
Well, you already jumped in. Got point of clarification.
I didn't start
You're
my
right.
my stopwatch, but you've been going for a while. So I just to clarify, ECF is not from the rezoning points of agreement.
I know.
And you know, I think
It's a project though that we need to track.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is absolutely what is needed. And whatever we call it, this holding feet to the fire, holding, you know, promises accountable. The rezoning is one process by which we can do that, but there are more points of deliverance that on the board's website are just considered current projects. La Marqueta, even the MEC, things that have, you know, been long in the pipeline that are ECF, those are not points of agreement follow-up, even though they're things that continue to languish in process, and, you know, Esplanade has traction. But so I just want to be careful lumping it all under 2017 rezoning points of agreement, though there are very specific action items that we want to follow up on there. They don't all fall underneath that. Just to start to find the right language so that when we do pack that punch, it resonates as it should.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yep.
Questions?
You proposed a spreadsheet, correct? That's our action and a work session,
Yes.
correct? Okay. I'm not comfortable fully tabling any ECF. I have a question. with regard to approaching that I would like to ask before we're there, asking.
For ECF,
Mhm.
yeah, we'll bring it up in new business. Jessica, Elliot,
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say I'm struggling to come up with anything else, but I thought all of your points for the tracker or whatever it becomes are good ones, especially the related elected official, because I myself have a very hard time understanding the political districts and who is what and where. So that would be really helpful. And I'm not excellent with spreadsheets, but I can help with obviously all of the Google Drive stuff. And George and I have been working on a presentation that's not ready yet about the sanitation garage. What were the lots, proposed by the CAG, the Community Action Group, and where sort of we are right now, and what's all led up to the sanitation garage. So at least that one thing we are paying really close attention to. So thank you, George, for your support on that.
May I ask a question to connect the dot relative to the last point that Jessica just brought up, Chair?
Yeah.
Thanks. My ears sort of peaked in the East Side Land Use Coalition discussion when CB6 started talking about some sort of phantom garage long promise that was moving somewhere else. Is it worth doing a little bit of research further down our side of the city to better understand whether there are things outside of our immediate jurisdiction that may be factoring in that we are unaware of, not being told directly about, or that we could work together with to get better and more and faster?
Yeah.
So-
I was going to respond to that when you originally brought it up, because I think George has mentioned this previously, and George, please correct me on my data here, but as I've heard from you, 7 and 8 have CD 7 and 8 have
Six, I'm sorry, it's 6 and 8.
6 and 8 and 3 all have a dead project. You mentioned 8, 10, and 11. There's it seems conglomerations of difficult sanitation garage situations across Manhattan. And you mentioned that the sanitation department's city lot ownage is decreasing. So I mentioned this, I think, at executive last month, that there is an opportunity to think about it comprehensively as a borough, but I think our main focus should obviously be our own community and the situation that we have, which is unacceptable.
I might also, and this ties into the ECF frame, only because there's a massive institutional partner with Health and Hospitals, which is it's not city owned. It's some other different separate thing that's part of the soup as it exists right now. And it's adjacent to what is city owned, that is in question in a lot of ways. And it is collectively as a place, either some educational / recreational district area in the lower part of East Harlem that is tied to an entrance to the Esplanade that is on the border of our district, that is very near a waste transfer station that was slipped into just below our waterfront. These are, it may be blasphemous to bring these things up kind of next to each other, and I'm not sure that I'm necessarily suggesting anything other than being very transparent about all of the pieces that are on our table as we engage neighbors who are having similar issues and agencies who are not forthcoming. The direct question is, are there advocacy-based CBOs that could and would inform and support any kind of formal push we might make that we would want to potentially engage in conversations with. Waste is a big issue in a hot topic right now. So I think it's something, finding the right point of CBO advocacy support if it doesn't exist in East Harlem now. I'm sure that it does exist throughout the city, and that there may be willingness to help support where there's a need. So separate issues, engaging CBOs relevant to DSNY purview to move the needle. And then the other larger set of land use issues that are messy, and adjacency is perhaps an opportunity that we have that we're not thinking about.
Beverly.
Yes, to jump off where Jessica and you guys was talking about regarding land use and the tractor. I want to thank colleague Mr. Nixon for putting up the post for training of the open data. I did attend that class, and it's been very helpful to try to pull information out as to what properties belong to what agency within Community Board 11. I think some type of link or a tracker in itself for the type of land that belong to different agencies be put on there. I found a lot of land that I would like to know if we're utilizing them now, because they have vacant no use under HPD. I was just looking under HPD. So I know that if we can pull these and have this type of documentation or data at our disposal of what we have here in our community, for, regardless of what agency is using it, whether it's vacant or being used, that we're able to pinpoint where they are and ask them about this for any type of service that we need within our community, with housing, school location, or anything that we need. The fact that for a while we didn't probably know what land was used and who had it, unless we have to do some really digging with the open data, that might bring it a little bit easier for us to track and keep an eye on. So like we can say, well, you haven't been using this facility, this tract of land for over 20 years. What are you doing with it? And we have the data to show how long you had it, how long it's been vacant, that it's not being used by any other agency, and push the envelope to make them use it that will benefit the community.
Thank you so much, Beverly, for that recommendation. We're definitely, we're gonna use it. You're 100% correct. I will let you and everyone else know, we did try to make a Hail Mary and get the BP's office to present today. A little bit on that topic to kind of show some of us how to use this. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to transpire, but with that said, we'll definitely keep encouraging the BP's office to potentially bring someone here to kind of give us a quick snippet of how to utilize that platform to perform some of the tasks that Beverly said. But with that said, we have a member that took the training, so we're definitely going to activate that and ensure it can service us further in tracking the points of agreement. Anyone else? Mr. James.
Well,
You know I was going to pick on you.
well, I will say this, is that I think tracking the points of agreement is a really great idea. There is a starting point already, because the Department of City Planning already in theory tracks them. the point will be to track and follow up and also to evaluate how they're scoring themselves, right? So we don't start with a blank piece of paper. We start with already, all the lists and what DCP thinks the progress is. So it's not, it sounds like a big job, but it really isn't so big. And so if you need my help or whatever, just, have Angel assign me a task. I'm more than willing to help out with that. I would also say this is that the points of agreement are very, very wide ranging. I think they include some stuff with La Marqueta and the MEC project, some of that was back from the 2008 points of agreement for 125th Street. I mean, there are other points of agreement beyond the 2017 one. And so, it's something that, and those don't even get tracked, right? Because that's they change the law and they start tracking it going forward, not going backwards. So my point is that there is a lot there, but we do have a good starting point and staying on top of these things, not only in this committee, but with other committees too, because air conditioners in schools, I think, was one of the points of agreement. Like, that's not really for this committee, but I bet you have another committee interested in that.
Well said. Well said. I put the track in the chat function, and which is the one that George was referencing. He's the one who gave me the link. If it's fractured, again, I have every intention of making sure it's a part of the minutes, and yeah, and then we'll start ours and we'll go from there. Jessica.
You said we were going to reapproach ECF and new business?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to lose George because I think he may be the one who could answer the question that I have, but
Understood. We're in old business.
I'm here.
Yeah, he's present. And if we're not able to get a hold of your concern today, we have further time as we continue before December. Beverly. Is that from before,
Yes.
Beverly, or you have another
Yes.
question?
Just another
Or
question.
Something
Is
to
it-
add, more to add for the
Yes.
tracker.
Well, not for the tracker. It was old business. I think we talked about it last month. In regards to a facility that had a fire damage on Park Avenue, ARC building. I just want to know if anybody heard anything as to what they're doing with that location, because it's all boarded up. If it's going to be, reused again, or can we use it for another purpose, or, just what's going on with it?
Belly, if you like, I'll table that for new business because I do want to close the
Okay.
rezoning and then go to the concern with ECF and Avalon Bay presenting in December. And then,
Okay.
yes, maybe Nosa could speak a little bit to that building, possibly, if not Khalid. Anything else on the rezoning, on making efforts towards the strategy of following up and following through on these items?
just want to offer my support, whatever you need, loop me in and I'm happy to help contribute. Listen.
Absolutely. The entire committee, as you guys will see, you all will get an opportunity to be involved and more importantly, to engage in the process. Okay, that said, Khalid, if you don't mind, we can move the agenda on to now new business. And we'll add to the table the ECF and Avalon project. And Jessica, the floor is yours.
It's really a burning question that I've had since we started talking about this in September. How much change in what's proposed invalidates the EULR?
Is that a question for me? Okay.
That's my question. I don't know who can answer it.
Well, okay, so I can answer it because I actually asked this question to the Department of City Planning because it's really not the EULR, it's the special permit, right? Because right now they need a special permit and you know, they got a rezoning and they're They're doing disposition, they had to do all of these things for Euler. And essentially it is the Department of Cities Planning position is that as long as they aren't asking for additional zoning waivers, meaning they have all of these waivers already, and if they don't want anything more, then it doesn't have to reopen Euler. They can materially change the program. They can remove the schools. They can remove units as long as they're not adding to the number of waivers. There is no reopening of Euler. I think this is a terrible idea. I think I said as much. I think that this this interpretation is wrong. Some of you may recall, there was a big legal fight over a project called Two Bridges on the Lower East Side, where the borough president, Gail Brewer, sued the city of New York, or sued the Planning Commission, because they did what's called a minor modification of a large scale plan, and essentially cut her out of the Euler process. Because that did not need Euler. That's what the City Planning Commission said in that project, which added 1,000-foot buildings onto a general large-scale site, and they lost. Meaning the Gail Brewer lost, and or at least on appeal she lost, and the project is moving forward. So that is their position now. And that is, unless they're asking for something additional, there is no reopening of Euler. You will not see it as part of the process. ECF is not required to be coming to this committee to speak on this. And,
George, can I just rebuttal?
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I mean, I feel like so I've read the the material that goes into getting the City Planning Commission approval, getting this approval. There's incredibly thick documentation that waxes poetic about what is going to be there, what was there, and why it's going to be that way. And what you're saying essentially is that's all going in the round file, and it doesn't really matter because the sort of the legal outcome of that process stands, even if what was agreed upon in the process goes out the window.
That's their position, Jessica. I'm not going to defend it. I mean, because I think it's wrong. I think it's absolutely wrong. And I will say this, is that I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't true. That wasn't their interpretation. Is that when you made a change into something that needed a general large-scale plan, you're amending the plan, you actually had to reopen Euler to do that. And then suddenly somebody on their legal team was like, well, I think we can make this different interpretation. And that's what they're doing. And they're defending.
Even with the historic precedent setting, parkland JOP issue that's embedded in all of this that we're not even talking about again.
Well, that's what their argument is. Yes, that's what that doesn't change their position. And I'm more than happy to share with you the exchange that I had back in June. This happened with the Department of City Planning on this very question. And you could get them, if Jason is interested, you could get them to come in to address this, to address this interpretation. Like, they're not, they shouldn't be making these decisions in a vacuum, right? They should be challenged to come to explain them to the people who they affect. And that's a problem because they are not doing that. And that I think is a very serious problem.
No, and I think the other question is, the reason, and if ECF is the lead applicant, right? They're a conglomeration created to do this project in good faith, essentially. But now they, as the ones who have advanced this agreement and this legal right to develop in our community by saying we were constituted so we could build some schools and refurbish the park, to say that that is, and the reason is because of market volatility. That's the reason we were given. Oh, the market changed, so there. Thank you for providing the information regarding the Planning Commission, their position, city planning, Department of City Planning, they are one, and I agree that it doesn't seem right fundamentally, and that the reason for the incredible change that may be upon us is kind of inadequate to be swept under the rug. That's all. So Jason, I wanted to have that conversation amongst
Thank you.
our committee as
Yeah,
opposed to in front of
there's
ECF.
Understood. Nilsa has her hand up. Thank you, Nilsa.
Thank you, Chair. So I was part of that. I was part of the board when this project came. I voted against it, if I remember correctly. I just didn't find like the tactics. You don't bring a whole bunch of high schoolers to a meeting or junior high schoolers to a meeting to advocate for a high school when they're not going to get the benefit of it. And so my question is, I hear everything you say, but it bothers me. This just cannot stay at this level, right? Like it's unacceptable that we were promised 3 schools and a special program for disabled children, for disabled high schoolers, and now we get nothing. And they got what they wanted from the board, as these organizations and developers usually do, where we get promised lots of things and then nobody comes through. And it's easy to forget. We have board members who leave, and it's easy now to track. So I applaud the effort of Jason and this committee to try to put everything on a level that we're looking at everything through a fine needle. My question is, should the board consider writing a letter to the deputy speaker regarding this issue, because high schools in her district were going to be built in that new development, which now will not happen. I think that, oftentimes we try to fight the good fight on our own. And I don't think at this time, I don't care if ECF comes. I didn't like the excuses I heard then. I don't think that the excuses are going to change now. I had a problem with the project when it first was brought to the land use committee. So I particularly don't need to hear them speak. I'd like to hear someone else speak about how we can either put something on the record of how we're feeling right now, that it gets almost like an addendum to that application, or there gets light shed on this situation that very often gets swept under the rug. So I was just curious, George, if you had anything that you can share on camera that will not get you into trouble, in terms of tactics that this board should consider in trying to get our whatever the board eventually votes on the record, because this should not just be part of meeting minutes that goes away. Someone comes, they tell us what they felt, the reasons why it fell through, and okay, we'll just document in our minutes, we'll put in our tracker that it didn't happen, high schools weren't built for our kids, the community did not get a net benefit, but oh, guess what? The project still goes on.
Right. Chair, can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have 2 parts to this. Number one, I think I think you do want to hear from ECF, because I think you do want to hear the details. I think they came in May and said that there were going to be changes, but they were very light on what the details were and the reasons for that, right? And they said market volatility, there are going to have to be changes, but really it matters what the changes are, right? And I think, just listening to them and seeing what they have to say is, the first step. And then the second step is, if what they have to say outrages you, which it might, then you have to harness that outrage and you have to take it to your political officials, right? Your elected officials. And you have to say, we approved one thing, we are getting another. And you should be doing that not only with this project, but this has happened before. I recently had to study the history of the museum on Fifth Avenue, the African Cultural Center, which is not a museum, it's a cultural center. It was promised to be a museum, it was promised to be a school, it was promised to be so many other things, and it morphed into something completely different that nobody ever even thought about, right?
Talk about it.
There are multiple examples of this, not only in East Harlem, but elsewhere as well. And I think you've got to harness that outrage about these promises that are being made and take it to people who can make decisions. And here's the other thing, is that the only way the city gets these things done is through these promises, right? They say, let us do this, and then we'll do that. And if they're not following through with their promises, this undermines this administration and every future administration's ability to get things done that they want to get done. Because the community is going to say, why should I believe that? You have this history of not following through with your promises. And so it should be in the administration's interest to get a solution that satisfies you and your community board and the people in the community, as well as ECF. And they should be the ones that step in, and city council and the administration that step in and barter something that is good for everybody.
George,
Thank
you're
you,
such a
George.
nice, I thank you, George, for that response. You're such a nice person. And I applaud your diplomacy. I think about the DSNY sites. I think about what's happened in this community every single time there's a project that doesn't quite go for the benefit of the community, and we're asked to be understanding. And so, while I personally, I do understand that ECF definitely should be on the record of what they say. I personally felt that this project was never going to happen the way we needed it to happen when that vote came in. So that's why I said, I don't have any expectations of something being said differently that would have convinced me that it was just volatility that caused this project to go in this direction. So, with that, I'm going to chime off, but I thank you for answering me, and because I definitely think that we need to shine a light on the fact that this community, in a lot of respects, gets promises that it doesn't get paid for, right? Like, if we don't get, it's not paid forward to us. We keep paying it forward to someone else. We keep letting our land being used for other things. We keep being the temporary DSNY site. However, right, the Africa Center is a perfect, I had forgotten about that. Yes. We're still waiting for Tito Puente statue. The list goes on and on and on. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I thank you, Jessica, for your insight and your fire. And I thank everybody who has equal fire on this committee, because I just think that enough is enough. Thank you.
And Nilsa, if I may, just to provide a little bit more resolve, as you well aware, not even in the sense of what you know as chair, but the BP's office, for reasons unknown to Jason, because I haven't been land use chair that long, is already all involved and interested in this particular project. Why? I can't speak to it today. Some of you have personal interest, reach out to Angel. It's transparent, it's open. I know Mark Levine, who hasn't been borough president too long, is already interested, particularly in the ECF and Avalon Bay project. Another point that to add to the diplomacy concept that George shared too, not only is ECF, we don't want ECF, I should say it, I do not want ECF if Avalon doesn't show up. If Avalon's not going to show up with ECF, because ECF utilized Avalon as the leverage point in the last discussion as to why they couldn't deliver on the arrangement. Final point to all involved. We should know what those asks are. I mean, even as a board member, as long as I've been, that project came and went, and I honestly probably just it was my first year, and it went right over my head as to the wants, the needs, the asks, and more importantly, the commitment. I know, simply put, for me, I heard 2 schools were being lost, and this high rise was being built, and the excuse was because of market rate going from 500 million to build a building to 1.1 billion, and I have the same attitude as everybody else, unacceptable. But as I stated back then, and I'll just reiterate today, it's good for us to get refamiliar with the ULUP. And maybe, George, as you always say, I do have asks. And one of the asks I would ask is probably just a simple list of what were the commitments. What do they want and what we're going to give? Nothing, not the 50, and this is for other people. Go read the 5,000 pages of the ULUP. I encourage you. But I promise you, the 5,000 pages of red tape, there's probably 10 to 20 points that we need to really know. And I'm very confident that Mr. James will decipher that and present it to the table. So then that way we're more equipped and prepared for next month. And I don't disagree with you, Jessica, and this needing to be a part of the discussion. So the 2 points, again, Nilsa, diplomatically, we're going to have both the developer and I guess ECF, if we're going to call them the funder, the agent, involved, and the BP's office is already involved in this. And given the amount of concern brought to the committee to me today, I am going to elevate it at executive this month. So those that want to attend the meeting and express the same concerns and start having that strategic conversation tomorrow with our Deputy Speaker, Diana Yala, about our concerns. I don't have to wait for a piece of paper. The resolution that we're talking about, yeah, let's get to that point, right? We're talking about that now. And if we're going to have this position of we're not going to accept certain things because whereas you said you were going to do things, my writers, my policy drivers, you're already there. Some of you are a lot more equipped to get that written out and start going before me. So we're prepared. So whatever we hear, right, wrong, or indifferent, we'll use every democratic tool that is at our forte that is driven by this board. So I hope that provides some insight. This ain't gonna get swept under the rug or put on some tracker and we'll forget about it. I mean, if I can't speak for the next chair, but if I drop that tomorrow, guess who's chair? Nilsa. So it ain't going anywhere. Candy, go ahead, you go.
So as you of course, you know that I was chair at the time this whole controversy of this project was happening. And at the time, because it was for the youth to have an extra, a school, which is, something that we needed in our community. And over the years, looking at passing by all the time, and I know that there was a lawsuit and a lot of stuff was going on. But now here we are 5 years down the line or more, and nothing's happened. And I've always asked, even after I no longer was chair, to follow up and find out what's going on with this project, because honestly, back then it was one thing, but right now, the way I feel that and I know this can be unprecedented, but if we don't start somewhere to start something new, and you know that Community Board 11, everybody uses our prototype to say, as an example for the next other community boards and the citywide to do anything else. And so my thing about this is that I feel, and this is me personally, as former chair to the land use, and I know that it was controversial, and I know that we all got pitted against each other at some point because of this project, but I feel we should just rescind the whole thing. And I know that there's money involved, and I know that there's a lot that they've engaged and committed themselves with the city, but they didn't, they're not coming through with the community. You know, they shortchanged the youth. No school is happening. Nothing's happening. Everything there is just like a big open space where we can utilize that ourselves, you know, to what we would like to see was much better utilized there. And yes, Avalon and ECF definitely got to be together. But I feel that just like when we're going for site control, if you don't get funded for that specific funding, you know, site that you're requesting for, it gets HPD rescinds it and takes it back unless you go back to them and tell them, I'm going to go for the same funding round. And then, you know, so like that, you can continue to have site control. You understand? So I think that that's something that should be looked at and say, okay, if every year, and I'm just talking for experience, that if you don't get that funding, you have to call HPD quickly, or you lose the site because you're not getting that funding, which is what you're asking site control for, to do some project there. You know, so I feel that maybe it's not something that the city is not used to doing, but I think it's something we should explore. You know, George, I know that you could probably look at that much better than us. You know, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there because honestly, the whole thing is regretting the fact that nothing happened. And even the lights, we got bamboozled, right? And I mean, I don't know if that's the better word to use, but I just feel like we just got to revisit it. And the whole project, even that whole site, you know, nothing is happening there. And no school is done. And we need a lot of schools with so many buildings coming up right now. And a lot of units coming in, a lot of new families and existing families in our community. Our schools are going to be super overcrowded. So we're going to need to have somewhere where we can better utilize that space there than what, you know, the luxury housing and the leaning tower that they wanted to put up there. You know, it's not working. You know, as years go by, things change and evolve, and nothing's happened. So my opinion is that I don't know if it can happen because we already went through the whole process and everything, but I think like just what HPD does to any community-based organization that is considering on utilizing a space for site control, that those same rules should apply, you know? So I don't know if that's precedent that it could be done, but if it can't, then, or if it could, I mean, it wouldn't be a first time, right? To try. So that's just my opinion. You know, I just feel like they're not doing anything.
You only miss the shots that you don't take.
Right. You
You're
know,
gonna take a shot. So George, if you don't mind, yeah, I definitely want it. That'll probably be a part of this whole, like, for lack of a better word, cheat sheet of understanding the agreement without going through the 10,000 pages of who had the site, who gave up the site. Now ECF has the site. Obviously, I love all the experience here between Candy, Nilsa, and George. I think we have a really good handle on where we were at, what they committed, where we're at today, and where we need to go.
And the parkland
and the
site.
brothers and sisters that are on here can surely keep up with and please put to all of you, all three of you, all four of you, anybody who knows about the project, share, because you're not wrong. It's not something that's the, you know what, that's my insanity with wanting to put the tracker, is the fact that I myself have heard hundreds of projects over the last 8 years of my membership, and I don't know too many that have come into fruition. So this is a big one, so it's an easy target. But that said, we need to start thinking strategically, how to be, and I like your word, so diplomatic and democratic about it. Right? I also don't want to be the witch hunter, and with all due respect, we're bugging out. Maybe they'll come here tomorrow and say, yo, I bought 10 pieces of land and I got 9 schools going up before this building goes up. Maybe. I'm with y'all, I'm not there, but let's hear it next December. So yep, site control. I don't know if you want to touch on that, George, or if you just want to research on it so I can get through the other people that got their hands up.
Can I just respond to Candy for a second?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Candy, your point I thought was right on target. This committee made a resolution recommending adoption of approval of the application that was before it. That went to full board. Full board voted on it, and this community board approved their application. Now, if the application has changed in such a way that you no longer approve of it, you should, even though it's not part of the Euler process, you
Right.
could, let me put it this way, you could do another resolution that you send to full board rescinding what you've done.
Thank you.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
That would be the process. Now,
Right.
that's up to you, how
Yeah,
you
no, I
handle it or
would.
not, but
So,
that's.
right now at this point, that's what I said. Me personally, and I don't mean to cut you off, but me personally, I would rescind it. Me personally would request to have it rescinded, only because nothing's happened. They did not come through. I mean, nothing that they said that they were going to do was done, period. And the proof is there. I mean, we see it all the time. And it's a slap in our face to do that. And I'm just tired of just, it's just all these developing, and then the city gets involved, and then no matter what we say or how we want to put things, then they're throwing our face, well, you're just an advisory. Yeah, but we're an advisory who actually do a lot of sweat equity, time, effort to make sure that we shape the community the right way, and we're paving the way. So they have to respect us and hear us in a way that is fine. We also, you don't work for us. You work for us. We don't work for you as elected officials. And I'm not disrespecting no elected officials, but that's the way it is, period. You're a public servant, just like we. And so our community is holding us accountable for what we're doing, whether we make right decisions or we don't. But if we have room to make the right decisions and make the wrong right, and we have that time, well, the time is of essence, and this is the moment, then we have to seize that moment to do that. And that's just my personal opinion.
I think most of us share the same sentiment, Candy, and I appreciate your passion and commitment. And George, thank you for the clarity. If somebody didn't see, I must have wrote, you can't see it because my screen's blurred, but I must have wrote resolution like 10 times already.
That was a
But-
nightmare.
But
That's
that's
a
as I
nightmare.
stated earlier, that's a piece of paper, right? And the paper has only as much influence as the voices and the people behind it. So I need not tell you, our chair for youth and education is probably one of the most passionate individuals I've ever met in my life, let alone on this board. And this is going to executive, right? And we're gonna
Thank you.
it's gonna stay at land use, but it's coming to executive when I walk in the door for November. So
Chair,
I
Chair.
want, okay.
No, I just wanted to echo what you were saying about resolution, but I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think about, right, this project was voted on, and honestly, I just know that the board voted for it because of the schools, the potential schools for the benefit, and the fact that the high school kids came and they did a presentation at land use. They tugged at the heartstring, and rightly so, right? I mean, they weren't going to get the benefit about it, but the future generations, right? That was the thought. And so, is there ever a possibility or a thought that when the land use does a resolution such as this, in giving support, that there can be some type of a clause or a disclaimer, even if it's just advisory, right? Like Candy brought up the fact we're advisory in status, but we're strong in purpose.
That's
What
right.
we say here is not advisory. It's what the community feels. And if you disregard it, you're disregarding what the community thinks. So I get very leery about that, that way that we get described. I understand it because it's a way to minimize community voices by
Right.
using words like that. So I think it's important that we don't do that. Where we add a clause that says we are agreeing to support this application based on what was presented. Any changes, any future changes, anything that materially changes the project in any scope that affects the community outcomes will render this maybe null and void, or something
Rescind it.
right, something that may lead to the rescinding of this thing, because they may say no, that you can't put that in. But I keep thinking that when you write these contracts, there's always like an out for someone. And maybe we need to start putting something in like letting you know, like, we're not stupid. So
That's fine.
you're gonna change this when you have your letter, but we're letting you know that if you do that, we got it on file, and we letting you know that we have a right, we're gonna go back and revisit it. I don't know if that's a thing, and I don't know if that's something that can be done, but it was just, I just wanted to throw it out there. Because
I love the idea.
was.
I think the
Mhm.
and you guys all know I'm process driven. I love templates. So um the formats that we have for approving these ULIP applications is based off a template that we created. So the answer to your question is simply put, without anyone's input, is yes. If we decide that that's what we want in the resolution, or the letter of support, or the conditional approval, or whatever word we want to play with, why we accept the project, it is this body's given right to present and place that in that document. I'll speak to Angel to draft something, because I know in the past, George has been monumental in kind of driving that conversation, because it gets, oh, you approved it without conditions, you disapproved it with conditions, those types of, I think of designers when I hear that. Approved is noted, make corrections noted, revise and resubmit. And my point to that is, yeah, the answer simply put to you, Nilsa, is yes. And I would ask Angel to drive a template, no different than what we did for land use when it first reconvened, under your leadership when you was under as chair, because it was a real big thing to have everybody understand the process, right? We created the 60 to 90-day rule with with developing a resolution. Not, that wasn't no law, that's no bylaw, that's not no rule. The CB11 did that. Your leadership as chair did that, right? So my answer is yeah, and I'm all for it. I wrote disclaimer as a term, but I definitely believe that there should be language that is consistent, especially with the approvals of projects, right? And I think that's something that maybe could be expressed at executive, that should be board-wide. Shouldn't just necessarily be for land use. It may be for
Yeah.
parks.
Every
that can-
committee.
right? And
With a
that
time
is
limit.
that in itself gives some sense of availability to holding people accountable. But also, furthermore, just like for some of you, when our ULIP presentation document is filled out, we have a whole list that's on that these developers love to say, yes, I'm going to do the affordability guidelines. Yes, I'm going to do the employment guide, whatever is the challenge that they kind of already know. When we go to CB11, we have our own policy on it, like not the district, not the, any politician. We have our own policy. We wrote our own policy, and it's within the presentation platform. Like that brother that presented today, he had to check off that list. Yes, I'm going to do this, and yes, I'm going to do that, or vice versa. No, right? So that's on the front end. I think, as your point is more to the resolution, the resolving of the contract on the back end, where we also need the opportunity to just kind of not only under ULIP, that a lot of this stuff, it does get lost. Like the BP office could trump us. City council comes involved and then they trump us. I mean,
And it's not the first
but-
time that happens.
but that said, the reality is, the answer is yes, and I 100% will be committed to instituting that type of process for this committee. Jessica.
Thank you, Jason. That's the first time and maybe the only time I'll ever hear Nilsa interrupt and speak out of turn because she's so moved. Thank you, Nilsa. Yeah, we're all human. So I have 3 observations. One, I think I want to, this is outside the box, but health and hospitals and adjacency is always important to consider, and nobody but us as community stakeholders would ask for that outside the box thinking. I think they're a huge institution right next door with a lot of land and they don't have a master plan. When you're doing a full block development next to another conglomerate that doesn't have any stated plan, that's a problem. So I don't know how to crack that nut, but I just want to suggest that as a land use issue, we perhaps start to engage. Noel is gone now, down to Bellevue, but who has replaced Noel, and how do we, I know woman Taisha is involved in their CAB, Community Advisory Board, but it, you know, whether it doesn't get to the heart of deliver our schools now, but it is another externality that I think we have leverage to start to inquire about. If we're not going to get everything we want, how we want it, then let's start to ask for other things that can be offered perhaps. The second thing I want to just bring up is there was a lawsuit by our neighbors who didn't want the building as high as it was, and they didn't want our school children nearby, is what I understand motivated part of that lawsuit. When I was invited to the table at the East Side Land Use Coalition, I think that there was some overlap in folks present and folks involved in the lawsuit and my representation of our district. So, you know, height was a factor. They didn't want an 80-story building that would cast shadows. Shadows go the other way. But from a contextual perspective, they didn't want it. So I think if we want to get our schools, it may help to engage our neighbors, not just Council Member Ayala, Deputy Speaker, but also Julie Menon, who is now just over the other side of 96th Street, which is one of those hard lines of divide that shouldn't continue to be reinforced by, we don't want what you want, we need something different. Last thing, we can, you know, if the partnership, the ECF and Avalon partnership isn't delivering on what they promised, we could perhaps suggest to ECF to fire Avalon. There are lots of smart developers, and if they can't do it, why don't we find someone who can? So, you know, who knows where this is going, but I think we can make those kinds of suggestions of, if this is a true partnership, you know, who's not holding up their end of the bargain and why, and can we find others who can perhaps do that? So more fuel for the fire. Thank you, Jason.
Excellent suggestions, Jessica. Each and every one of them. H&H, I'm definitely going to bring up at the executive committee to see who we can work with, if anybody. I mean, I don't know anyone, but I'm more than certain out of the 50 bodies that we have assembled, someone knows who we can get in contact with for that location. And then yeah, I agree. It's not just one elected. We always just, I mean, unfortunately, I can't speak for others. I always use Diana, Ayala, because whoever's in that seat, whether it's Diana, Melissa, Michael, Johnny, Billy, whoever's going to be there in the future, that has the most, for lack of a better word, influence for our district. But I don't disagree with you that we do need to partner with everyone simultaneously. And I think that, you know, that I do think that some of these people that are now new in office, they can really show us who they are if they actually show interest to our concerns. And I think that this is something that I can coordinate with the district needs chair during discussions with the elected officials in the coming months that happen from now until February, and try to broker that conversation. That said, though, I'm not appointed. We're all appointed. So you're all appointed by a council member or an elected official. Let them know what is bothering you already. You know, if that might help me. You know, they won't just say, "Oh, Jason, you know, you're chasing it." No, this is brought up I'm hearing it in forums that got nothing to do with land. And everybody's outraged about the schools. It's as simple as that, let alone all of the other particulars and concerns with the project. And I think that's why ECF is adamant in presenting Avalon to the table. And I like that option of telling ECF, I don't need to tell you, I'm a project manager. I'm a general contractor by trade. Most of my business is by removing contractors that are failing in practice. Probably the better part of my career was being an emergency contractor. So I have the same attitude with a development. Maybe they need a real legit developer, or maybe they need to speak to the brother that presented today that seems to have the science down right. But again, that's not our necessarily purview, but we have, there's nothing holding us back from recommending or referring. So I really like that idea, but you know, that's me personally. Me as a chair, unbiased, we need to be open and democratic at what we're presented with next month. So the biggest driving force I hear, you know, just for our already established process is resolution. Whether that resolution goes in favor of what they say to us next month, or it goes completely against the original arrangement that was set up for the ULUP, that is something that we should already start driving in our head. Because I'm with you that they may sell us whatever we want to hear next month.
Not this time.
And tell us they're going to build 10 buildings of schools. And then the project proceeds, as George just gave you the horror example that happened in a district that I know is, you know, for lack of a better word, a lot more engaged than necessarily some of our constituents. And we want to make sure our constituents understand the magnitude of not, for lack of a better word, protesting, you know, arrangement that's brought to the table that people are reneging on. So that was a mouthful, but the answer to everything that everyone's saying is yes. We're going to do it. We're going to work on it. And I really ask that you do the same. You know, that's like, as always, we bring it up in committee. And the people I'm talking to is, it's, you know, I'm preaching to the choir, but the brothers and sisters that are new to the committee and that are hearing, my number is 646-342-5026. Reach out, and let's figure out if you know any other strategic methods that we can utilize to address our concerns as it relates to this particular project.
Jason, can I just say one more thing? I don't mean to be out of line.
No, we're going on 3 hours.
No, I know, I won't, because I'm getting sleepy already. But listen, something that Jessica brought up about bringing additional people, and I think that, and it's up to you guys, but we can invite the cab from Metropolitan Cab and letting them know that we're gonna have ECF over, because that's the hospitals there. They also an advisory. I know when I was on the cab of Metropolitan Hospital, we fought hard tooth and nail for not only Draper Hall, but to also save the hospital from being closed down, you know, and we utilized everyone within the neighborhood, within everybody that we could have gotten to chime in to make sure that it did not happen. Unfortunately, down the line, the city buckled and gave up Draper Hall. But at the end of the day, we managed to save both. You understand? So I think that we can use the same mechanism and get the cab from Metropolitan Hospital. They're new members that are former members of Community Board 11. They're engaged, they're in there. So I know that one of the current district leader is also on the board of Metropolitan Hospital. So I think that we can get them, invite them, and let them know that, you know, this is what's happening. We like for you to come and visit and listen in on what's happening, because it's right in their front door. And so, I mean, it will impact the hospital just the same. So I think it will be good if we can invite them, extend the invitation to join our meeting.
I mean,
whether they choose not to is up to them. But I feel like the
you.
more voices, the better it is too, you know. Forces.
So let me help you out with that one. You guys can invite anybody to our meetings. There does not need to be a forum. This is a public forum, right? That's the reason why I have to do meeting minutes, even though we record these meetings and put them up on YouTube. I say all that to say this. Invite them. If you know, I will definitely bring this to light, to this cab that you're referring, but if you know, you know, and I know you know, please invite them, and I do think that there's a lot of organizations that should probably be involved in this, to listen though, because that's one of my biggest concerns about next month is that the argument happens before the debate.
Mhm.
And I would like for us to ensure that whatever we invite or whomever we invite, it's everyone's right to be there, that they have the mindset of let's see what these people present. We have every intention on taking action and seeing forth to the commitment, but you know, if we don't give them the and again, I'm beating the dead horse. If we don't give them the opportunity to speak and we start just immediately, you know,
That's why we're
chastising,
doing it
yeah,
now, Jason. No.
yeah.
Um,
We're doing it now, but these groups that we might invite for next month might want to get their taste. And with all due respect, then
No,
it
no,
defeats the purpose. You know,
no, because
I'm
they're
not
coming
saying to that
our
cab you're
house.
talking. I'm not talking about the necessarily the cab you're referring to, but I'm just saying you guys, you understand what I'm saying. You all been around. We're
Jason,
activists.
to
If you give
Candy's,
them house rules,
Yeah,
house rules.
that's why you're the
right.
chair, right? We
I
got
try,
house
but look,
to
sometimes
to Candy's point, there may be a formal liaison. I know Noel Alicea used to be the community liaison and Noel would work with the cab, and he also worked for the
Right.
hospital. So whoever took on Noel's role, there may be a formal way to extend invitation to the
To the
hospital to
liaison.
come to our meeting, which I think would be a smart thing to do. And maybe that comes from Angel or Khalid, comes from the board
no,
office.
if you're asking it for it formally, then yes.
Because we got staff, right?
Exactly. That's your right as a
No, I
board
don't want to
member.
put, I know how much
No,
everybody does, but when
you're
you can
giving,
make
I'm
that.
gonna put it in the minutes and tell Angel, that's what we gotta do.
We
It's
can
your
ask
right as a
Angel.
committee member. No, honestly, if we're gonna formally ask them, it's a direction. It's not necessarily he's gonna do his job. If we ask him to do it, he's gonna do it. So if that's what we wanna do, I already put it down. Please extend, a formal invitation to our December meeting. You said H&H, the Metropolitan Hospitals cab, which just so you know, the CB11 itself is also connected to all these cabs within our district. We don't necessarily appoint people, but that's for you to hold your leadership accountable. And I'm not just the only leader here, so. But there are other cabs that we should necessarily be appointing members to. And I think, if I'm wrong, Candy and Nelson, you guys been around longer than me, you probably know, that's probably one of those cabs that we're supposed to put
You're
a
supposed to.
CB11 member on
Yes.
from
Yeah.
the health committee. So that said, Jessica, we're gonna get that activated.
Informally, I can invite an active member of the cab who is very interested in connecting the dots here and there if possible. So
Absolutely.
happy to do
It's
that informal
everyone's
extension
right to be
invitation
here.
for the week's end.
I would love to have, how many people we got? We got 10 participants. I would love that number to say 100, 200. I only seen it once in my career, and that's when we did the town hall for district needs. You know, we had more
Mhm.
people there than we did that we have at full
committee.
board meetings. That said, I would like to close the topic because it is getting late, and I'm trying to get I can't, how do you say happy and happy hungry?
Right.
Because I'm not angry. I'm just happy, but I'm still hungry.
Yeah, me too.
Beverly, yes, I do know you had one item that you wanted for new business. I was trying to, I guess, unnicely say, do you want to wait till next month or you want to keep going?
Yeah, we can wait until next month for that new business, but I want some clarification and regarding for the future when developers and stuff come to us and we have to give approval during the ULUP. If we can do ULUPs with conditions, and is that's correct?
Yes, correct, 100%. As a
So
matter
when
of fact, the last probably ever since, and not to take too much clout on it, but Jessica did hint on it last month, ever since my cousin was chair, that was like law, right? We didn't just approve or disapprove without conditions. Even if we approved, we put conditions. And I used to watch the meetings of land use where there was one person who was a stenographer writing all the conditions, and then another person writing the minutes, and then the chair housing the meeting, which I look forward to for us doing one day. But yes, we have every right to put conditions. And
And
from what
would
I've
those
seen from
conditions
land use, it's been
include-
good practice.
Would those conditions include a backup plan if, like with Avalon, and they're not coming through with their part of the deal, that they have, the people who's presenting would have a backup deal? Like you said, you can fire people as a construction manager, that contractors. Could that be where it's a list? They have more than one person. If one, their company don't work well and keep up with the bargains that was, don't adhere to the bargains that we say yes to. Could that be part of the?
And I think
issue?
that's kind of what the answer to your question is. Yes, we could list any condition we
Okay.
necessarily want as a body, but to add to it, I really like Candy's point about holding them accountable to the arrangement that they did not necessarily made to us, but to another administrative agency that may have even gave them the land, right? Or gave them the property based off of our arrangement.
Right.
Which would make it even more interesting. It just tacks on to what you're saying. The answer is yes. I guess what we're trying to strategize is what else on top of the resolutions or letters of support that we provide to developers. What are the avenues which Mr. James is going to be so helpful in assisting us in navigating them, and then we have a decision to be made of. Again, after we're democratic and diplomatic and listening to our presentation next month of what action, if at any action we take, if that answers your question.
And we could also put time limit. Can we put time limits in those also?
Yeah and no. The challenge with time is always the argument of the developer, right? The developer is the one who controls the finance, they control the clock. So, you could put it, you also don't want your conditions to not have any value. And that's kind of the concern that we had as an executive group, with some of the land use actions that used to come out of the committee. And that's a different hat I'm using now, which is me being treasurer and part of the executive committee, where we were concerned that some of the items that would come out of the approved process through land use wouldn't necessarily be taken seriously because you're adding a condition that necessarily isn't within our purview. That makes sense.
Okay. All right, that does. Thank you so very much.
Okay, not a problem. So that said, Beverly, was so nice to conclude our additional new business. So, Mr. Khalid, I know it's been a long one. Thank you for being a part of your first land use meeting. In my perspective, I have to give Mr. Khalid a round of applause. He did a great job. And if you would love to, after you roll call us out, we'll adjourn.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Take your time.
Okay, I'm calling you members by your last names. Devin Cronshaw,
Present.
Kenneth Crouch,
Here.
Jessica Elliott,
Here.
Jessica Morris,
Here.
Nilsa Orama,
Here.
Beverly Pabon,
Here.
Vinny Torres, Jason Villanueva,
Present.
Candy Vivez Vasquez.
Present.
Thank you. Only one member absent. Everybody else is still present, Chair.
Thank you so much, Khalid. The meeting has been adjourned at 9:26 p.m. Everyone, thank you for your time. Appreciate your passion and commitment, and I look forward to your continued service.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Have a great
Good
evening.
night, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Jason.
night.
Thank you, George.